Countless branches of death wrapped the fiery being up in the air, pulling it down like a bolt of black lightning. Countless branches of death wrapped the fiery being up in the air, pulling it down like a bolt of black lightning. Countless branches and vines quickly enveloped that being. The skyscraping tree wrapped them both up, seemingly out to swallow them whole. While many monsters and humans had experienced what just happened to Xia Qingyan, nothing had been as shocking as what happened before them just now. That was because the tree went out of its way to eat that one particular being up, which gave many a breather, enabling them to escape by charging outside of the canyon. "This is ridiculous," Tan Zimo of the Violet Heavenly Palace said after seeing what happened, wondering if it worth it dying for the sake of a woman. Yi Futian had pretty much flipped the Violet Heavenly Palace over with what he did. Despite being on opposing sides, they had to acknowledge that he was very formidable and was superbly talented. It was too bad that he had to die in such a manner. Virgin Genie of Brahma's pure sky sighed deeply as well. It was a pity that Yi Futian would die for a woman. While the sentiment was indeed respectable, she did not see the point of throwing one's life away because of it. Training was difficult. It would be more so if someone were to get to Yi Futian's current level. Qi Xiangang and all those around Yi Futian sported glum expression. There was no stopping it, and not even Emperor Xia would have been able to do anything. They stepped forward towards the Tree of Death. Qi Xiangang lashed out with both hands, shattering a great number of branches and vines outside, yet he was still unable to get through. Yaya took to the sky and had her sword in the air. Towering sword matrices appeared beneath her feet. Her expression was frosty as swords whooshed out of the sword matrix on her palm. However, like Qi Xiangang, she remained incapable of breaking through. The cut vines and branches simply regrew in an instant. She felt rather vexed and kept bringing her swords down continuously, but she remained incapable of making it through. The sound of swords zipping was heard. She charged inside the mass of branches and vines with her sword matrices. However, the will of the great path bound her immediately. She turned around and found Qi Xiangang behind her. Qi Xiangang shook his head at her and said, "His luck on this trip is incredible." Yaya was dumbfounded as she looked at Qi Xiangang. She knew that Qi Xiangang had some special ability, allowing her to peer into fate and luck. He had checked out Yi Futian's luck before all of them entered. Furthermore, she recalled the death of the prophet just a while ago. As such, it seemed that Yi Futian's luck was so formidable that he definitely would not just perish right there and then. She was rather relieved to find that, but she nonetheless remained anxious, keeping her eyes on the sight. Qi Xiangang stopped everyone else trying to get before him. While the older man had no idea what tricks Yi Futian had up his sleeves, he knew that student of his was someone exceptional. He would survive charging into a place like that. For the others, however, it would probably have been on a one-way trip. Yi Futian's body was tangled and buried by that tree of death. Boundless, deathly aura and branches lashed out at him. He burst in terrifying might of the flames of the way, even utilizing the power of that fire spirit orb within his life palace, burning those deathly branches away in a frenzy. A terrifying fire zone appeared all around his body, and his eyes turned into flames. At that moment, that statue-like tall, imposing figure seemed to have manifested a great many arms, lashing out at Yi Futian, who was protecting Xia Qingyan. It burst through the binding of the will of flames and headed towards Xia Qingyan. It was evident that despite having been dead for so many years, that figure clung to life still nonetheless. Boom! Yi Futian's eyes burned. Terrifying branches burst from him. Green wool shrouded the place all of a sudden, swishing out as they moved. The divine tree of life within his life contained boundless life. If you want the power of life that badly, then come and take it. Yi Futian's eyes were cold. Those branches sensed it all in an instant and charged at Yi Futian in a frenzy. Boundless, deathly aura burst into his body. The deathly vines stabbed into his world tree, intending to drain all that will of life in Yi Futian's life spirit in a frenzy. The world tree swayed, and boundless divine light burst. When the will of death came upon him, it seemed to have ended up assimilated and devoured, as if it had been merged inside his life spirit. Xia Qingyuan, who was being protected by Yi Futian, was shocked at that scene. She had given in to despair before, and there was no longer sorrow in her. She thought both of them would have ended up devoured. Yet, she saw that it was Yi Futian's life spirit devouring the will of death from that tree of death instead. That is probably his primary life spirit, Xia Qingyuan muttered to herself. It was as if there was a divine tree fighting against another divine tree. That deathly aura was absorbed into Yi Futian's body, and he devoured even the branches as they surged into his body. That tree of death seemed to be alive, sending more branches at him. Furthermore, the canyon trembled violently at that moment. More branches of death burst from the bottom of the canyon, heading towards that region. That scene was very shocking. What is going on? Some who were leaving stopped at that scene. They turned around to get a better look and found countless branches from the canyon beneath them, heading towards a single direction. Is he still alive? They were shocked deep down. They found what was happening to be utterly impossible. It was something that not even the will of Ren Huang had been able to resist. Both Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan were just saints, and there was no way they could have survived being buried by that tree of death. Zhan Yuan of the supreme body of the great path from the violet heavenly palace halted and looked in that direction. He did not continue moving forward but instead kept his eyes locked there. Are we sticking around? Some at his side asked. We'll check out for a little bit longer, Zhan Yuan replied. Many people of top-notch forces stopped. A terrifying nine-headed phoenix in the air devoured the deathly auras in a frenzy. Its eyes were cold and giving off a violent, unruly aura. The 9 heads of that phoenix made it look even more cold and unforgiving. The 9-headed phoenixes had been a branch of the phoenixes, yet they were seen as outcasts. However, some of terrifying powers had emerged from their ranks, and they were taken into the Sky Demon Court. They were extremely formidable and had always been at odds with the phoenixes. At that moment, that 9-headed phoenix's eyes glared at that space that was being buried. The will of death was so thick that if it were to swallow it all, it would have done a lot of good. Furthermore, if it could gain the remains of that ancient Ren Huang that looked like an imposing statue, things would have even been more perfect. It was a pity that it would not be able to resist being devoured by that power. However, things seemed to have taken a peculiar turn within. Yi Futian's world tree life spirit seemed to be gobbling up the deathly auras and the branches while still being inside the tree of death, absorbing it into his life palace. At present, his life palace was filled with death. It had taken over the world of his life palace altogether. It made his entire body course with deathly auras, so much so that even his fair face seemed to have the will of death streaking about it. In that god of the death-like statue, countless ancient tree-like arms were extending and lashing out at Yi Futian, tangling with the world tree that was coiling around his body. Both powers were at odds with each other, encroaching each other. The world tree life spirit swayed, and divine light surged in every single part of the ancient tree as if it was able to take everything in the world into it. Both divine trees seemed to be merging. The branches from that tree of death seeped into the world tree life spirit bit by bit. It looked like a snake was trying to swallow an elephant. Deathly auras continued to surge inside Xia Qingyuan's body unceasingly. The deathly auras on her grew increasingly thick, and Yi Futian was unable to do much than wrap her body up with his world tree, sending the energy of life into her body to fight the will of death in her stead. Time passed, and the ones outside continued to watch the extremely thick will of death rumbling about. The branches were all over the place, preventing them from telling what was happening inside. The will of death is subsiding, a mighty one said. Many people's pupils contracted. They were rather puzzled, wondering if Yi Futian was indeed alive. They were extremely curious as to what was happening inside. Some outside were seeing the branches wilting one after another at that moment, and they were shocked. The will of the great path of death is drying up? Just the hell is happening? They wondered. Yusheng stood about at the side and watched everything nervously. Everyone else at his side was doing the same. They were rattled at that scene, yet they were relieved deep down, thinking that it was going to be all right. That guy sure is always making miracles happen, Yusheng thought. Wu Yong and the others were very stunned as well. The longer they spent around Yi Futian, the more terrifying they found him to be. What happened all those years ago back at Emperor Qua's ruins was already a testament to his mettle, and they were unable to believe that he was even able to survive such a despairing state. The drain of that ancient tree was increasingly obvious. The will of death throughout the canyon was dwindling. Many mighty ones had their eyes locked right below them. At that moment, both Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan seemed to be wrapped inside as if in a cocoon. The branches of his world tree had even extended outwards, wrapping up even that statue that looked like a god of death, devouring the deathly aura in them bit by bit. Despite having been dead for many years, that being still had the formidable great path of death in them. As a Renhuang, that power of great path had long been melded with their body and blood. Even though they had been dead for many years, their body remained intact, and the will of the great path stayed behind as well. The world tree speed into that being's body bit by bit, entangling and devouring them gradually. The will of death stained Yi Futian's world tree pitch black, yet the branches of the world tree continued to wrap that being up as if they were devouring that fire spirit orb back in Emperor Qua's ruins, as well as that bone from the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions. Yi Futian's body seemed to have turned into a terrifying whirlpool. The world tree rescinded back into his body and disappeared altogether. That Renhuang being was no longer seen as well. In Yi Futian's life palace, however, a statue-like being appeared instead. Yi Futian was pitch black all over, and the deathly aura was extremely thick about him. Xia Qingyuan was not in a good state either. Both of them seemed to have simply turned into statues, unflinching. The tree of death that wrapped them both up wilted in a frenzy. The branches shrouding the place were wilting and falling as well. The deathly aura dissipated gradually, scattering in the winds. The deathly aura is almost gone. Those outside were very shocked. Yusheng stepped forward and charged inside the branches of the ancient tree, shattering them in a frenzy. Those branches became extremely fragile by then, and one blow was all it would have taken to crush them. They were quickly reduced to dust. Yusheng appeared somewhere below. Two figures stood quietly by his side, like two statues. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Are they dead? People wondered. Are they dead? People wondered. All eyes were on those two statue-like figures below. Both of them were pitch black all over, a result of the encroachment of the will of death. At that moment, there was a whiff of aura coursing throughout Yi Futian's body, seemingly dispelling the will of death bit by bit. That caused Mighty One's pupils to contract. They were able to survive that? They thought, incredulous. Untold numbers of human and demonic beast cultivators alike had ended up dead, killed right after they were gobbled up by that boundless power of death. Those too were devoured by that tree of death as well, buried within the boundless will of death. That god of the death-like statue seemed to still be imbued with the will of the great path that it carried while still alive, and that being had gone specifically after those two. Yet both of them survived. The crowd had yet to forget that there had been a will of Renhuang manifesting just a short while ago, and it was unable to handle the attacks and dissipated. All of those people around them were puzzled as to how Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan managed to survive. Furthermore, they had just witnessed the will of death wilting away. The crowd then looked at the body of those two, wondering if they had absorbed all that will of death. However, none of them found that to be remotely possible. There was no way two saints would have been able to consume every single bit of that tree of death's power. That would have probably only been possible if it was a Renhuang doing it. That statue of death is gone, Zhan Yuan of the Violet Heavenly Palace said while still in the air. Lightning flickered in his eyes as he walked. That statue had been the dead body of a Renhuang, and that Renhuang would have been someone extremely formidable, as that Renhuang had been able to burst with such terrifying will of the great path of death even after being dead for so long. That will was powerful enough to render the whole canyon into the canyon of death. However, that Renhuang statue was no more at the moment. He wondered if it had indeed been those two who had taken it away. In another direction, a 9-headed phoenix was seen flapping its wings. Its eyes were extremely cold. It had been having a good time devouring the power of death, yet that power dried up instead. If it were to be able to get that dead body of Renhuang, it would have been of huge benefit to its training. Many mighty ones harbored similar thoughts at the moment. That was the dead body of a Renhuang who harbored extremely formidable will of the great path of death, after all. No one would have thought of such things before. It was as everyone was busy trying to stay alive. At that moment, however, the crisis was over. Yi Futian managed to suck the tree of death dry. All of them naturally thought of other things at the moment. The mood in the canyon became rather peculiar. Qi Xiangang was unbelievably perceptive, and he was able to sense the changes in the atmosphere around him. The mighty ones in the canyon harbored greedy thoughts at the moment. He understood that they were all out to grab that Renhuang's corpse. We have all entered the Origin Mountains and experienced quite a perilous period. We've all been through life and death situations right before this. While the two of them had never meant to pull what they did, they nonetheless helped all of us here escape the crisis in the canyon. I think we should all continue on our way right now, Qi Xiangang said, seemingly hinting to everyone that both Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan could be considered their saviors. If they were to do anything against those two, that would have been like a dog biting the hand of the one who fed it. A monster dove down at that moment, heading straight for Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan at a blitzing speed. That monster was a rock, intending to zip past at high speeds and grab Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan. Qi Xuangang's expression remained cold, finding that be it humans or demons, all had greedy thoughts. Furthermore, demonic beasts would have usually expressed such thoughts in ways that were more direct. Qi Xiangang stepped out, and the ring of light of the great path coursed all about him. Ancient symbols circled him as he grabbed at the air. That rock that had been zipping past felt its body bound, and it was utterly unable to move. It was as if a formless might of the great path shrouded its body, preventing it from moving forward. Access web novel. Live if you like watching manga, comics. Beings with no honor shall be cut down, Qi Xiangang muttered, and a sword fell from the sky, piercing through that rock's body in an instant and shattering it. Rain of blood fell from the sky shortly after. The eyes of many monsters contracted, finding Qi Xiangang to truly be formidable. Many mighty ones from the Violet Heavenly Palace turned to look at Zhang Yuan, who was at the front. It was as if they were waiting for his order, commanding them to grab the bodies or otherwise. Zhang Yuan's eyes sparkled with lightning. He had grown very curious as to how Yi Futian pulled all those extraordinary feats off. Take them, Zhang Yuan ordered. Several holiness of nirvanas from the Violet Heavenly Palace stepped forward and moved out. Lightning flashed all over the sky in an instant. Terrifying lightning of the great path gathered in the air and struck downward. Those holiness of nirvanas were extremely formidable beings, and the flashes of lightning they brought were of such might that they made others feel stifled. Qi Xiangang frowned and looked glum. The Violet Heavenly Palace was one of the pinnacle forces to be found in the Heavenly Mandate realm, and it was a given that cultivators who came from such a place would be extremely difficult to deal with. Furthermore, there were also mighty ones eyeing them. Hand him over to us. We shall spare his life, a mighty one from the Violet Heavenly Palace in the air said coldly. Qi Xiangang looked up in the sky, thinking that supreme forces of Heavenly Mandate realm were indeed overbearing. The will of the great path coursed all about him, and the clouds in the sky howled as they resonated with the great path. The mighty ones from the Violet Heavenly Palace willed as they saw him move. Lightning flashed, and bolts rained down on him continuously, making the scene looking like doomsday. A terrifying bolt of lightning struck from above, hitting Qi Xiangang. Qi Xiangang responded by pointing his finger in the air, clashing with that bolt of lightning. Intense rumbling was heard, and the air shook violently. The power of that one finger placed above Qi Xuangang's head resisted that lightning bolt from above, eventually destroying it altogether. Ha! The mighty ones from the Violet Heavenly Palace saw that and felt astonished. They never expected that the holiness of nirvana standing before them would be so powerful. They were vaguely able to sense that Qi Xuangang's comprehension of the great path had surpassed that of theirs, and he stood at the very pinnacle of holiness of nirvana level. Their eyes became more serious at that thought. According to what Tan Zimo said, back in that battle, Yi Futian was boastful enough to tell them to pick any plane of sainthood they would have liked to fight against, and they did not select a holiness of nirvana among themselves to do battle. from the looks of things at the moment, if there were to be a battle fought between holiness of nirvanas from both sides, they would have lost all the same. They eyed each other, and several holiness of nirvanas took to the sky, taking different corners and extended their hands, performing seals and invoking lightning from the heavens. Intense rumbling rattled in the eardrums of the mighty ones. Several holiness of nirvanas appeared at the same time, bringing down heavenly might and boundless lightning in the area of the sky, making the scene look like doomsday. Training has not been easy, and you'll have a chance of getting to Renhuang Plain in the future. Don't make such a mistake right now. A holiness of nirvana said to Qi Xiangang. That devastating might shrouded everything below within its range of attack. Qi Xiangang shot a look at those before him and then took to the air, saying, "You all, protect him." Rumbling was continuously heard in the sky. Upright bolts of lightning were conjured and brought down on him like swords. That was a terrifying killing move of the violet heavenly palace, the Jiuxiao Thunder Sword. Down, they all muttered, and the move struck at Qi Xiangang like a terrifying flash. Qi Shuangang's body was turned into a furnace of the great path, becoming intensely brilliant as he absorbed the great paths of the world. He then extended his hand to take that sword attack. The Jiuxiao Thunder Sword dropped onto him. He resisted through sheer brute force with only one hand taking the attack. Boundless, devastating lightning dropped onto him right away. His body seemed to be that of flesh and blood no longer. It instead appeared to be more like a conjuration of the great path. Ancient symbols circled him, and that devastating lightning attack was unable to get through to him. Boundlessly terrifying, devastating power swept all over the place in the air, making the scene look extremely shocking. Such power indeed. Many mighty ones were shocked at that scene before them. Qi Xiangang was taking on several holiness of nirvanas from the violet heavenly palace all on his own, after all. That was a scene like no other. All who witnessed what was happening wondered who that person was. Tan Zimo and those around him sported pale expressions. If they were to have holiness of nirvanas fight in that battle back then, they would have, no doubt, lost. They had been allowed to take their pick at any plane of sainthood. A virgin from the supreme force that was Brahma's pure sky looked from afar, feeling shocked deep down. That person's plane is so profound that he would have probably touched the edge of Renhuang Plain, a holiness of nirvana of Brahma's pure sky said. There would have been no way a holiness of nirvana would have been able to take on several holiness of nirvanas from the violet heavenly palace otherwise. It was apparent that Qi Shuangang's plane was more profound. Who are those people? A virgin of unbelievable beauty at the very front said. That woman was the #1 virgin in Brahma's pure sky, named Qin He. She was at the very pinnacle in terms of talents or appearance, and she was known as the #1 of the future Jiutian goddesses. The one taking the lead in that group is Yi Futian, a younger brother in training of that descendant of the Gu clan, who was taken away by Gu Tianxing, Virgin Genie elaborated. She, too, was a leading figure of a line of virgins. The prophet prophesied that she would have become one of the Jiutian goddesses. However, in the Brahma's pure sky, her position paled in comparison with Qin He's. The latter had been lauded unanimously as one who came from the #1 of the 9 lineages, and she would have become the leading figure of the Jiutian goddesses. They were the ones who wreaked havoc in the violet heavenly palace then, Qin He said. Holy light coursed all over her body, and she looked dazzling. Indeed. Virgin Genie nodded. She thought for a bit and then continued, furthermore, he was the last person who met the prophet. Qin He looked in the direction where the battle was taking place. She deemed that a person capable of surviving being devoured by the tree of death would have had secrets on him. It was no surprise why Zhan Yuan wanted a piece of Yi Futian. He would have wanted more than just that dead body. In that direction, Zhan Yuan, the one with the supreme body of the path of the violet heavenly palace, moved. Devastating, world-ending might of lightning was conjured. Terrifying lightning diagrams appeared in the air. At the same time, demonic beasts flashed about in other directions, heading straight for Yi Futian. They deemed that Qi Xiangang would probably be the strongest of all of them. With him being held back by the ones from the violet heavenly palace, the demonic beasts would have their chance. Wu Yong and the others around flashed and appeared around Yi Futian, bursting with their strongest flames and bringing about a raging battle within mere moments. Sword matrices appeared on Yaya. She stepped into the air, and her eyes turned into swords, shooting straight at Zhan Yuan. The 8 bolts of divine lightning were brought down. The heavenly thunder brought the lightning of doomsday. Yaya took to the air and lashed out with her sword, blasting at all 8 bolts of divine lightning, resisting them and intending to block their path. Her swords and the lightning bolts clashed. The lightning matrix of doomsday was conjured, and Zhan Yuan's eyes flashed with the terrifying will of lightning. Thunder rumbled as he stepped forward, shocking the spiritual will of everyone within earshot. "You're no match for me. Move aside," Zhan Yuan said. He pointed at the air with his palm, and thunder rumbled, making the might of lightning even more terrifying than before. He was of the supreme body of the path, and all lightning would submit to his command. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. A huge battle burst high up the canyon, and many monsters acted at the same time. All the other demonic beasts were looking for opportunities as well. A huge battle burst high up the canyon, and many monsters acted at the same time. All the other demonic beasts were looking for opportunities as well. Qi Xiangang held off the holiness of nirvanas from the violet heavenly palace all on his own, fighting to a deadlock in the air. While his plane was indeed high, the ones he was fighting with were of a supreme force in the heavenly mandate realm, after all, and they were extremely formidable. No common holiness of nirvanas would have been able to fight against him otherwise, given how he was already at the edge of breaking into Renhuang Plain. He had ended up killing the 9th servant at the ancient imperial city, which was known as the #1 city back in Crimson Dragon realm back then. Such battles would have needed the fighters to at least be at unblemished saint level before they were able to do anything. The monsters protecting Kong Xian acted as well, but given how the monsters they were about to fight were of overwhelming numbers, they would not have probably lasted for long. "Get him out of this battlefield," a cold voice said. Kong Xian, Yi Wuchen, and the others looked at the one talking. It was the glass saint. While she had been with them all this time, she hardly spoke, making it such that she was hardly noticeable. She spent most of her time training with Yaya. At that moment, her beautiful yet emotionless eyes seemed to be flickered with something. She flashed and moved forward. Yu Sheng charged forward as well, intending to take Yi Futian away. The might of lightning struck from above. Yu Sheng roared, and the lightning bolt struck him. Its power coursed throughout his body, making his blood boil, and he had to stop. He looked up coldly at the mighty ones of the violet heavenly palace, who were coming down from above. Sword will on Yaya burst in the air. Thousands of swords appeared around her and were turned into a terrifying storm before charging straight at Zhan Yuan. That storm of swords seemed to be able to envelop the sky. Zhan Yuan glared at his opponent with contempt while he continued moving. Lightning of the great path was sent down, blasting onto the storm of swords, shattering them all together. However, he then saw Yaya disappearing from where she stood altogether. At the very next moment, Yaya was seen taking Yi Futian's and Xia Qingyuan's bodies and left right away. She took only one step, which seemed like a sword zipping through the air, and she ended up somewhere far away. "You think you can just run?" The mighty ones were all dumbfounded. Zhan Yuan did not expect that Yaya would have just chosen to run so suddenly. He took one step and propelled himself forward like purple lightning. Yaya continued to be bombarded with lightning strikes all from above as he chased after her. Monsters up the air howled as they moved above. Many demonic beasts targeted her and attacked. Yaya zipped past the air like a sword, evading the incoming attacks. At times, attacks blasted right onto her, and rumbling was heard. However, she disappeared right after that, making it unclear if the attacks actually hit her. The great path of space. That speed was comparable to a holiness of nirvana. Indeed, Qin He, a virgin of Brahma's pure sky, said. She stepped forward as well, chasing after Yaya. It seemed that the mighty ones of the Canyon of Death seemed to have coalesced into a torrent within moments. It was as they were all heading in the same direction. The Canyon of Death was extremely vast. However, as she kept zipping about in the sky, she eventually came to the edge and charged outside. The place beyond was still filled with mountainous regions, looking barren and dead. Demonic clouds shrouded the sky as if to tell them that danger lurked everywhere. Lightning continued to flash around Yaya. It was evident that Zhang Yuan remained right behind her, and she had yet to shrug him away. There was a 9-headed phoenix in that demonic cloud, clad in crimson flames, riding the clouds as it moved. Its wings were able to shroud the sky as soon as they were spread, enabling it to zip past a vast distance. Its 9 pairs of eyes were incredibly sharp as it kept a close eye on the ones below. The speed at which it moved was incredible as it was able to catch up with everyone. 9-headed phoenixes were an extremely rare breed, considered to be a mutated breed of the phoenixes. While those birds were not recognized by the phoenixes to be one of them, but 9-headed phoenixes were all of terrifying talents. They were able to travel at blitzing speeds. They had 9 heads and were versed in manipulating phoenix fire. Furthermore, they harbored the potential for conjuring flames of devastation. As such, that 9-headed phoenix had been consuming the will of death back then. There were also many demonic beasts and human cultivators coming from all corners. However, unless their training was extremely formidable, they would not have been able to catch up. Zhang Yuan, who was still in the air, frowned at that moment. The Origin Mountains were filled with danger. If they were to simply shoot forward in a frenzy, it was possible that they would have met the same fate as they did back at the Canyon Death, their lives all hanging by a thread. However, the woman before Zhang Yuan simply charged forward insanely. Even if his attacks managed to hit and injure her, she adamantly refused to stop. At that moment, Zhang Yuan kept his gaze forward and began to feel slightly uneasy. Cultivators were extremely perceptive, especially when they were at his level. While they were still unable to predict what would have happened, they were still able to feel something when they were truly near somewhere dangerous. He lifted his head and looked forward, feeling that they might have stepped into somewhere dangerous again. The terrain ahead of them was a barren low ground with many swords stabbed into it. The swords were all filled with dirt and rust. It was as if they had been weathered for many, many years. Read more chapter on novel Full One Look, and one was able to tell that the swords were endless. Auras that made one's heart race emanated from the land. There was a sword-shaped hill somewhere far away, looking like a hill-like gigantic sword had been plunged into the ground, pinning down everything around. As Zhang Yuan got increasingly close, that sense of danger became increasingly intense. However, that woman before him did not seem to have any intentions of stopping but had simply charged into that area. Zhang Yuan's face became pale. He wondered if she had a death wish. Yaya had actually hesitated for a bit back there, but she quickly recalled that not even that tree of death had been able to kill Futian, so the other dangerous areas would not have been able to pose a threat to his life. She was able to sense that Futian had fallen into a coma due to the will of death being too great for him to digest, but he was recovering this whole time. What was happening at that moment was but a process. Her speed had noticeably decreased. She trained in the way of swords, yet she was unable to sense any sword will at the moment. She only felt that the ground below was dangerous. A formless current seemed to have melded into the air, seeping in her body and making her feel somewhat restless. That current seemed to have harbored intense, formless resentment, affecting her will. However, she did not stop right there and then, electing to continue moving into deeper regions. Zhang Yuan, who was of supreme body of the Great Path, looked at her, thinking that she indeed had guts. He concluded that if she dared to do so, then there was nothing for him to be afraid of. Lightning flashed at that thought, and he sped forward. Lightning coursed all over his body, and rumbling thunder was heard, blasting away anything in his way. The power imbued within the will of the great path of lightning was inherently capable of dispelling negative things and beings. The power of the lightning of the 9 heavens was to dispel evils and protect the righteous, after all. That aura permeating the place seeped into his mind as soon as he stepped into the area as well, intending to affect him. However, his entire being rumbled with thunderous sounds, making him look solemn. It was as if he had been enveloped in holy lightning, dispelling all that evil aura around him. He lowered his head and glanced below. That place should have been a battlefield all those years ago, suppressing the souls of many mighty ones from back then, thus giving birth to that intense resentment all over the place. Many mighty ones arrived later. However, when they had gotten near that area, they were unable to help but slow down, appearing very hesitant. Those who were able to go that far had been those of greater training, and as such, they were also more perceptive as well. Just when they were still hesitating, hurricanes whipped about in the air. A 9-headed phoenix zipped past into the area. Its eyes were cold and overbearing. It was as if it was determined to get its claws on whatever it could. Yaya continued on her way forward, getting deep into the area. Negative emotions continued to affect her. It was fortunate that she had been training for 2 lifetimes, resulting in her extremely stable will. She stopped when she came to that sword-like hill, putting Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan down. Red blood was seen spilling from the corner of her mouth after a soft cough. She looked at Zhang Yuan, who was coming at her, and she burst with raging sword will. It was apparent that she had been injured when she was on the run, and she had been holding it in all the while. Zhang Yuan came to her from the air and lowered his head to look at her from afar. Thunderous lightning flashed in the air, and will of lightning was seen flickering in his eyes. He then said to Yaya, "There is no need for you to do this. Hand him over. I won't take his life." Yaya glared at him with cold eyes. She did not say anything. Sword will of great path coursed all over her and was then turned into sword diagrams. The sky was filled with intense killing intent, shrouding the entire place. There seemed to have been an ethereal figure emerging from within her in an instant, melding with her way of the sword. A dazzling sword matrix lashed out with a sword, moving quicker than a bolt of lightning. Lightning diagrams appeared above Zhang Yuan's head. 8 bolts of lightning flashed, circling about, and boundless divine lightning gathered. A bolt of lightning was fired, and it clashed with the sword. 2 extremely dazzling light of devastation crossed in midair. That devastating power swept out at the vast space all around them. Yaya's clothes and her long hair billowed. She stepped forward, and yet another ethereal figure burst out of her body, then transformed into a sword. The sword came through and melded with the sword that was previously fired, making the might of the sword even more powerful. "Fight with your life all you want. It won't be of any use," Zhang Yuan said coldly. His hands waved about, and that terrifying lightning diagram brought even more bolts of lightning down around Yaya, locking her surroundings away. A bolt of lightning that was even more terrifying blasted at the center, clashing with her swords. If it had not been for Yaya having comprehension of the great path at holiness of nirvana level, she definitely would not have been his match. In truth, despite still being an unblemished saint, Zhang Yuan's combat prowess was already at holiness of nirvana level. The bodies of Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan were placed above that sword-like mountain. Boundless resentment headed straight for both of them, absorbing the will of death all about them. Streaks of light coursed about Yi Futian's body. He seemed to have been able to sense what was going on outside as he repelled the will of death with everything he had. Thunderous noises were vaguely heard from within his body. Gales whipped about. A 9-headed phoenix emerged from the demonic clouds high above the sky. A cry of the phoenix was heard as it opened its mouth, heading straight for Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan, intending to gobble them up. "You filthy beast!" Zhang Yuan shot a glance at it, and a bolt of lightning rained from above straight at the 9-headed phoenix. The bird then spread its crimson wings, taking the brunt of the lightning attack head-on. That will of lightning tempered its body. Every single feather on the bird seemed to have been impenetrable, as if they were constructs of the heavens, glimmering with dazzling light. It continued to dive down and headed straight for Yi Futian's body. It was apparent that the 9-headed phoenix was a monster so ridiculously terrifying that it had no fear of the one who possessed a supreme body of the great path. The aura all about Yi Futian rumbled below. Just when the bird was about to consume him, that pitch-black body of his burst with faint dazzling light. That bird came down and picked both of them up in its beak. Its vast wings continued to flap, intending to fly away from that dangerous place. However, at that moment, Yi Futian finally burst with intense, brilliant light. That pitch-black figure opened his eyes all of a sudden. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian was able to perceive what was happening at the moment, but the qi of death was too strong, and his whole body was eroded. Yi Futian was able to perceive what was happening at the moment, but the qi of death was too strong, and his whole body was eroded. Before, even his life spirit was occupied by the will of death, and the life spirit tree was also dyed the color of death. He had been using the power of the ancient tree to expel the will of death, but now, something changed in his life spirit. He took a look at the situation he was in, and suddenly, a horrifying ray of golden light burst out of his body. The roaring sound came out, and all of a sudden, a loud shrieking was heard from Nine-Headed Phoenix's mouth. At this moment, the Nine-Headed Phoenix was leaving the space very quickly, his 9 heads exuding an aura of violence, his vast body full of lethal coldness. It was very imposing. But at this moment, tens of thousands of golden light rays burst from one of his huge mouths. He tilted his head, from which a loud roar came. He let out a long shriek. He wanted to close his beak, but it was torn up. A figure rushed out of it, bathed in golden light while holding another person, who seemed lifeless. The Nine-Headed Phoenix breathed out at Yi Futian. The horrifying life force struck Yi Futian. Boom! Crimson lightning flashed across the sky. His body turned into a bolt of lightning. His mouth spat out a keen crimson sword of destruction, the destructive dark power, veiling the sky and hiding the sun, covering the whole void sky. The Nine-Headed Phoenix was also an overawing figure of his clan, an unblemished demon saint, with appalling combat ability. Yi Futian looked up and felt that the force of destruction was burying this space. The sacred light shone on his whole body, the deed of thorough comprehension exploding and purifying his body. His body turned into a cauldron of the great law, expelling all forces of darkness. Above his body, suddenly, the trumpeting sound of the elephant came, trembling between the sky and the earth. Inside his body, the roaring sound continued, just like the symphony of the great law. What was more frightening was that in the light curtain of the deed of thorough comprehension, a boundless huge elephant phantom showed up above Yi Futian's body. The divine elephant was like a demon god. With one roar, it could make the void air tremble. The rumbling sound continued. The flash of the divine elephant rose into the sky, slashing toward the sword of destruction that covered the sky and hid the sun. Appalling waves exploded in the space as if the trembling space would be destroyed. The Nine-Headed Phoenix breathed the fire of destruction, engulfing the void sky and burning the sky and earth. Yi Futian held Xia Qingyuan's body in one hand and took one step forward. The trumpeting sound trembled between the sky and earth. His body soared into the sky like a bolt of lightning, moving forward in the flame of destruction. The devastating fire burned down but was shrouded by a sacred golden halo, blocked by the inviolable figure of a giant elephant. Yi Futian's fist punched out, and the sound of the elephant shook the sky. Tens of thousands of elephants roared in unison, trampling the space. Thousands of elephants came out, galloping, crossing the sky. What a terrifying scene! The crimson Nine-Headed Phoenix made an extremely sharp shriek. His 9 heads spewed out flames, and his claws smashed down. Phantoms of elephants were torn and shattered, and the claws thrust toward Yi Futian. The demon aura billowed and surged between the sky and the earth. A boundless 9-headed phoenix bird appeared, its claws smashing down powerfully. It collided with Yi Futian's fist. Bang! With a loud noise, the 9-headed phoenix felt that his claws didn't smash on flesh, but rather on a statue of an elephant. Between them, 2 phantoms were colliding and clashing with each other. It was the confrontation between a sacred giant elephant and a 9-headed phoenix. The imposing might shook the 9-headed phoenix's body to the sky. His appalling eyes stared at Yi Futian. How could this human cultivator of true self-Saint Plain contend with him by strength? The enormous power of the elephant was the ability of a demon clan. Where did he learn it? At this moment, Yi Futian loosened the hand holding Xia Qingyuan, and branches and vines swept up and wrapped her body. His might was supporting her body. Yi Futian's chilly eyes stared at the nine-headed phoenix in the void sky, and the imperial bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions in his body emitted a dazzling brilliance. Now, he was possessed by the divine elephant. Boom! He took a step out. The void air vibrated. A shocking scene of thousands of elephants trumpeting in unison appeared between the sky and earth as if he was also the king of divine elephants. In another part of the Origin Mountains, a group of warriors was on their way. They were from the divine elephant clan and were traveling in the sky. But at this moment, as if perceiving something, they all turned back and looked toward one direction, where they faintly sensed a divine feeling of being summoned. This feeling was wonderful, but they all understood that it must be related to their divine elephant clan. Could it be any treasure left by their ancestors in the Origin Mountains? Let's go! They turned around and went in that direction, all with solemn looks. On the battlefield, the nine-headed phoenix's body was suspended in the sky. When his wings spread, they were like clouds reaching the edges of the sky, covering the sphere and hiding the sun. Around his body, phantoms of divine elephants showed up. He walked in the air, trampling on history. He opened his wings, flapping. His body was like a flash of lightning, but he could feel that the repressive force limited his speed. Virum! Yi Futian's body soared into the sky. It was the first time the nine-headed phoenix felt threatened by a human cultivator. He let out a rumble. The wills of the great law turned into destructive beams of dark light, flowing up to the sky, surrounding his body, converging into an appalling storm of destruction. He spread his wings and thrust them out. Suddenly, beams of destructive light darted towards the surrounding elephant phantoms and collided violently. At this moment, Yi Futian came out. He thrust 2 fists at the same time, piercing into the sky. The divine elephant guarded the sky dome, crushing the void air. The nine-headed phoenix's claws smashed down, followed by endless destructive storms, clawing toward Yi Futian. 2 of them had an appalling fight in the void sky. 1 human and 1 demon beast clashed against each other. The nine-headed phoenix spread his wings and flickered. Yi Futian followed closely, punching his fist again and again in the void. They kept colliding and conflicting in different locations of the sky. The air was shaking violently. Lightning flashed by. Yi Futian grabbed his claws and rushed upward, breaking through his defense and smashing toward the nine-headed phoenix's belly with his relatively insignificant fist. But as the punch smashed out, both the sky and earth made a dull sound, and that attack directly hit the nine-headed phoenix's huge body, cracking his bones and tearing his organs. He let out a painful shriek and smashed his claws towards Yi Futian's abdomen. One punch after another, Yi Futian blasted the nine-headed phoenix's huge body into the sky. He depended on the reaction force to fly backward, then crossed the void air, and returned to where Xia Qingyuan was and held her in his arms. In the upper sky, the 9 heads of the phoenix were all bleeding, his blood dripping down. At this moment, his life force fluctuated drastically above his huge body. His body seemed somewhat unstable. His cold eyes took a glance at Yi Futian. Wings flickering, he flew into the distance. He had given up. At this time, on another battlefield, Yaya did 9 sword strikes continually, one after another blowing towards Zhang Yuan. She also turned into a sword and charged toward Zhang's body. But behind Zhang Yuan, an appalling matrix showed up, devouring divine thunder of all skies and dropping down. Swords were all wrapped into the thunderstorm. At this moment, a devastating thunderstorm swept out, blasting on Yaya's body. Yaya spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was struck by lightning, and she flew away, felling towards the lower sky. Bang! Yaya's body hit the ground and made a dent. Many broken swords flew out. Appalling phantoms suddenly appeared on the black earth and flung themselves at Yaya's body, like evil spirits. A flash of lightning came and wiped off the evil spirits. Zhang Xian looked down at Yaya in the lower sky and said, "You did a good job. From now on, you can cultivate by my side and serve me." Yaya raised her head and glanced at him coldly. This leading figure of the Violet Heavenly Dynasty was extremely arrogant. Virum! A thunderbolt struck through the void sky. Zhang Xian raised one hand and drew out a palm print of thunder. After a loud noise, a sword was inserted on the thunder matrix in his palm. The sword wanted to penetrate it but was turned into ashes in the might of thunder. A figure flickered and landed on the ground, picking up Yaya. He raised his head and took a cold glance at Zhang Yuan, turning around and heading towards the sword matrix. Zhang Yuan was not in a hurry. For him, capturing them was like capturing sitting ducks. None of them could escape. During his fight with Yaya, he felt this woman's combat power was quite good. Any casual cultivator of his level who was able to fight with him for a while could be considered outstanding. Moreover, she was extremely decisive in her shots and hard on herself. She was also sincere to friends and was eager to protect Yi Futian at any cost. So, he appreciated her and thought it would be nice to have such a person around him. As for an intimate relationship, he only had cultivation in his mind and had never thought about it. "Are you okay?" Yi Futian asked Yaya, infusing life force into Yaya's body. The will of life emitted from the branches and leaves of the world tree. Yaya's pale face turned red. Her gorgeous eyes looked at Yi Futian. For these years, this elder brother had been calling her little sister, but always needed her protection, but now he had grown to the point where she would no longer be needed soon. Her cultivation had not been restored to its peak, but Yi Futian was almost catching up with her. However, she was still happy. After this trip, if they could leave the mountain of origin safely, Yi Futian would no longer need her protection. Today, he had defeated the nine-headed phoenix big demon beast of unblemished Saint Plain. Yes, Yaya nodded her head slightly and said, Yi Futian didn't know she had thought this much. He left Xia Qingyuan beside Yaya, then turned and stood up. He raised his head, looking toward Zhang Yuan in the void sky. His stare was extremely cold. "Give me the corpse of the Renhuang and that piece of bone," Zhang Yuan said. Just now, he had noticed the battle between Yi Futian and the nine-headed phoenix. It should be the strength of that bone. He had not expected that piece of bone wanted by Yingzhou Mountain was the bone of the former divine elephant emperor of 10 directions. What an unexpected surprise. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1400 Fighting with the Supreme Master. Chapter 1400 Fighting with the Supreme Master. Yi Futian stood there, gazing at Zhang Yuan in the void sky. There was a booming sound coming out of his body, and it became louder and louder. A faint sound of an elephant trumpeting also came out of him. The void air trembled as if an invisible might of the great law had fallen from the sky dome. The vast void air was permeated with an invisible might. The roar was getting louder and louder. Yi Futian walked in the void air, his body releasing thousands of beams of golden light, enveloped by the giant phantom of a sacred elephant. Zhang Yuan stared at Yi Futian's body. He seemed to have perceived the existence of the demon emperor's elephant bone. Did Yi Futian use the power of the emperor's bone to defeat the nine-headed phoenix big demon beast? Seeing Yi Futian coming, Zhang Yuan showed indifference as if Yi Futian didn't even deserve his attention. He raised one arm, stretching out his hand to draw thunder from the sky. Above his head, the thunder divine matrix was in formation. The pattern was extremely appalling. As the Supreme Master, he was born with the talent to use the law of thunder and had cultivated in at least 3 levels of all the 8 divine thunder laws of the Violet Heavenly Palace. The 3rd level meant the unblemished Saint Plain, and the 4th level was the Nirvana Saint Plain. And he had mastered the 3rd levels or maybe even the 4th levels of the 8 thunder laws. How powerful would his lightning matrix of doomsday be? He held out one palm, and the divine thunder fell from the sky, like a punishment of heaven, exterminating all existence. Under the appalling might of the thunderous punishment, Yi Futian's figure looked insignificant as if he would be turned into ashes under the mighty thunder of doomsday. Yi Futian was still striding in the void sky, all elephants trumpeting. Between the sky and earth, many demon elephants appeared, trampling the sky dome, dashing toward the upper sky. Around his body, the aura of deed of thorough comprehension appeared and shrouded him. He blended into the phantom of the divine elephant. The power of the bone of divine elephant emperor of 10 directions in his body erupted. He walked in the sky like an incarnation of the divine elephant. Booming. As the thunder descended, countless giant elephants galloped, darting towards Zhang Yuan in the void sky. The light of the divine thunder collided with countless giant elephants, which led to the disastrous scene. Phantoms of the giant elephants were annihilated and shattered by lightning and turned into nothingness, but as Futian kept marching, endless elephants showed up. The dazzling light of heavenly punishment fell on Futian's phantom of the divine elephant, trying to tear off the divine elephant's body. The sky and earth roared, and Futian continued moving upward. Although the divine elephants were enduring the extreme pressure of destruction and being distorted, they kept sprinting in the void air, smashing toward Zhang Yuan. Zhang Yuan frowned. He looked at the phantom of the divine elephant rushing into the void, raised one palm and slapped down. Thunder was hidden in his palm. When the divine elephant struck, his palm directly hit the divine elephant's skull. A horrifying booming sound came out. Zhang Yuan's body was pumped into the sky, but the body of the divine elephant was also flashing with the horrifying thunder. However, the elephant figure was not broken or annihilated. The elephant's phantom was condensed, like a real divine elephant king on his arrival. That elephant bone. Zhang Yuan looked down at the elephant king's figure and felt the demon emperor's might bursting out of it. He could feel the existence of the elephant king's bone from the divine elephant's body. Could it be that this elephant figure was supported by that piece of elephant emperor's bone? That piece of bone was a treasure of the Renhuang level. The celestial fox palace was full of idiots who pretended to be clever. They even took out the bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 direction and gave it to others. However, even though he had the bone of the demon emperor, what could he do? Zhang Yuan stretched out his hands. The divine thunder rolled in the upper sky, and the boundless sky was all covered by thunder clouds, which rushed towards the lightning matrix of doomsday above his head. The dazzling lightning illuminated this dark space as if it had been daylight. Zhang Yuan looked down at Futian, with the horrifying will of thunder in his eyes. Thunder from the 8 directions of the space converged. In the lightning matrix of doomsday, the thunder clouds sealed the sky and shrouded the lower space. The center of the matrix was connected to the divine thunder in the skydome. Zhang Yuan stretched out one hand, and suddenly an almost transparent divine sword of thunder appeared in his hand that carried such a dazzling light one could be blinded. The lightning thunder of doomsday. Zhang Yuan stretched out one hand, and the sword fell and thrust toward Futian. At this moment, the sky and earth were under the power of destruction. Futian was shrouded in lightning from the 8 directions and could not avoid this sword and had to receive the blow. Yaya looked at them. Her face was slightly pale. This was a nirvana-level attack. Zhang Yuan, the supreme master of Violet Heavenly Palace, the strongest warrior of this generation, was considered as the successor of the future Violet Heavenly Palace and direct disciple of the Heavenly Palace Lord. His strength was undeniable. As an unblemished saint, he was able to use the might of the Nirvana Saint Plane. Even though she had cultivated for 2 terms, she was still lost to him, while he wasn't even putting in an effort. Seeing the thunder sword of doomsday, she knew that if he had used the sword on her during the previous fight, she would not have been able to defend herself. Zhang Yuan even didn't need to try his best when confronting her. The divine elephant let out a roar and covered Futian inside. He looked up to the sky, and countless demon elephants ran out. Futian did not escape but went straight to the sky. Savage golden divine elephants rushed toward the imminent sword of catastrophe, and the ultimate suppressing power of the great law swept out. The skydome was suffocating. Wisps of the demon emperor's might burst out from the dazzling divine elephant's body. Boom! The sword slashed down. The thunder sword of doomsday thrashed on the body of the divine elephant. Endless light of destruction struck down and suddenly engulfed the divine elephant's huge body as if it was trying to penetrate and shatter it into pieces. Bang! Thousands of rays of golden light erupted over the divine elephant, suppressing the great law between the sky and earth. The void sky where the collision happened trembled violently, roaring. The scene was extremely horrifying. With a loud sound, Futian and the divine elephant's body were both shaken downward. Crevices appeared on the divine elephant's body. Lightning of destruction penetrated inside and tried to destroy it, but the divine aura emitting from the divine elephant's body instantly repaired them. On the other side, the divine sword continued shattering, turning into endless lightning and fading away between the sky and the earth. The scene made Zhang Yuan frown. He stared at Futian, with a pair of eyes twinkling with the will of thunder. How did the phantom of the divine elephant remain unbroken? Just now, that blow made him feel like the divine elephant was a real body, instead of a non-existent phantom. No wonder. It is the bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions, Zhang Yuan said. Saint Plain cultivators were no longer influenced by the limit of mortal flesh, let alone cultivators of the Renhuang Plain. The flesh and veins of warriors of the Renhuang Plain were no longer normal ones. Their blood and bones were all unusual things. Their robust bloodline could be inherited by future generations. Their bones were bones of laws, containing cultivation wills. That piece of demon bone obtained by Futian might be an extraordinary law bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions, which contains so much might that it even could cast a divine elephant's figure. Most of Zhang Yuan's conjectures were correct, but he got the most important thing wrong. The divine elephant was not born of cohesion. It was a concrete life spirit cast by Futian. Moreover, the bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions was smelting in the life spirit, which made the life spirit contain the imperial might. Futian heard Zhang Yuan's words and knew that he could not tell the difference. When one reached the Saint Plain, their life spirit would be the same as a real entity. The demon emperor's life spirit was the same as that of a big demon beast. Normal people could not see the difference. Now, Futian summoned the life spirit of the divine elephant, but Zhang Yuan thought it was born of the demon emperor's bone. Boom! The void air trembled, and the divine elephant jumped out into the void, crushing the sky, which made Zhang Yuan frown. With such a powerful sword strike, Zhang Yuan could have even threatened a Nirvana Plain saint, but he not only failed to kill this true self-saint cultivator but also didn't do much damage to him. Futian kept coming toward him and launched attacks. Even though he knew Futian used the power of the demon emperor's bone, it still upset him. The heavy might shrouded his body. Zhang Yuan was standing in the void air and felt an extremely repressive force. The divine elephants were galloping across the clouds, and Futian was like the king of all divine elephants, leading the elephant herd toward Zhang Yuan. Zhang Yuan waved his hand, and immediately the thunder matrix of doomsday fell, like a thunderstorm that engulfed everything heading towards the elephants. Boom! Endless light burst out of Futian's body. Around him, countless demon elephants ran across the sky, and the divine elephant king directly rushed into the matrix. A devastating storm raged above the sky dome. The scene was horrifying. The rumbling sound came, and the thunder matrix of doomsday was broken, crazily bursting and shattering. The thunder matrix of doomsday was completely shattered by the endless divine elephants. The divine elephant king rushed into the void air, while Zhang Yuan hurriedly retreated toward the side. Two of them once again separated. Zhang Yuan stared at Futian, looking a little embarrassed. Had this cultivator been able to challenge him by using the power of the demon emperor's bone? Boom! At this moment he saw Futian stepping in the void sky. He raised his head and saw an authentic divine elephant emperor in the upper air, striding on the sky dome. Each step he took was followed by the trembling of the space as if space was under his suppression. Zhang Yuan had a strong feeling that horrifying oppression was falling on his body. He started to wonder whether Futian had gotten that piece of bone as well as the demon emperor's cultivation methods. Bang! The void air trembled again, and the sky began shaking. Endless might dripped from the sky. All of the sudden, countless phantoms of divine elephants appeared in the boundless sky. Futian turned into the incarnation of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions, tramping over all skies and crushing all great laws. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1401 Snatches from All Sides. Chapter 1401 Snatches from all sides. Zhang Yuan stood in the void and summoned the divine thunder, but at this moment, he felt that the divine thunder of the great law was almost suppressed as if it was difficult to gather. He looked up at Yi Futian, seeing that his body was dazzling, and he was possessed by the divine elephant. It was rumored that the demon monarch's Mount Divine Elephant Emperor of 10 Directions had invincible power. Ancient books said the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions trod on the sky and crushed the earth. Nowadays, nobody knew how powerful he was, but that the king of divine elephants, the overlord of the demon realm, must have unparalleled power to suppress all great laws. Yi Futian was still striding. His steps seemed to contain the power that suppressed the great law, like a supreme mystical method that blended into the power of elephants. Each step was like a manifestation of the heavenly might. Even a powerful cultivator like Zhang Yuan felt an extremely powerful pressure from that. Bang! Yi Futian took another step out, and the void air trembled. Tens of thousands of elephant phantoms fell and darted towards Zhang Yuan. A thunderous boom came from Zhang Yuan's body. He saw the endless phantoms of demon elephants stampeding towards him, so he released a gorgeous aura of thunder. Yi Futian wanted to defeat him? How could he fail? He lifted one foot. A sacred aura burst out from his body, and his body seemed to turn into that of a thunder deity. The thunderous roar broke out from every part of his body, resonating with the great law. He also took a step out, and the sound of thunder broke through the world, sweeping over all directions. The attacking giant elephant figures all burst and shattered, collapsing over the sky dome. An intimidating Renhuang might also have exploded from Zhang Yuan's body. The aura of Renhuang shone between the sky and earth, blooming from his torso. Zhang Yuan glanced at the walking figure in the air and said, "Even though the bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions has supreme power, you are not the only one who possesses imperial instruments." After he said it, his body transformed into the body of the thunder god, and the unparalleled law of thunder erupted from every part of his body. The sky dome seemed unable to restrain him. He walked in the void sky, heading toward Yi Futian. Wherever he went, the divine light of thunder swept out of his body, destroying all phantoms of giant elephants. Yi Futian watched Zhang Yuan coming step by step. He knew that Zhang Yuan also used a Renhuang object and merged it into his body, which made his body like that of a true thunder god. Moreover, as a supreme master, when Zhang Yuan turned into the thunder form, his physical body could become a matrix. Now he was the thunder matrix of doomsday. When he stretched out his hand, endless divine thunder could descend. Even the thunderous roar coming from his body contained power that could smash everything and destroy the phantoms of demon elephants. Zhang Yuan directly walked toward Yi Futian. Those demon elephant phantoms were unable to approach him. The moment they came near him, they would either be swept away by the light of thunder or be shattered by the horrifying thunder roars. He blended the Renhuang might into his law. How powerful it was! The two of them walked towards each other. Their power grew stronger and stronger as if both sides had strong beliefs and were not afraid of the collision. Boom! Finally, they reached each other. Yi Futian, who possessed the divine elephant, stomped on Zhang Yuan's body. The roaring thunder shone, and Zhang Yuan's body became larger and turned into that of a true fighting god of thunder. The endless lightning turned into a series of purple lightning, connecting to his body. Countless wills of thunder between the sky and earth resonated with the fighting god of thunder he had transformed into. Zhang Yuan raised his fist and punched it toward the elephant's dropping giant foot. The law of thunder was appalling in the sky. Countless thunder swords of doomsday blasted out of his fist, trying to penetrate the divine elephant. At the same time, the endless divine light of thunder erupted from his body, sweeping towards Yi Futian. Finally, the phantoms of the divine elephants trembled, but their violent force of the same level also made Zhang Yuan move backward. His body rose straight into the sky, thrusting toward Yi Futian like a bolt of lightning. The roars and light rays of thunder erupting above his body could destroy all the existence of the Saint Plane, but it couldn't annihilate the divine elephant that enveloped Yi Futian. Yi Futian also raised his fist and punched forward. At this moment, The figure of the fighting thunder god and the divine elephant collided head-on. The space surrounding them seemed to be falling apart. Every attack between them was extremely shocking. Over the sky dome, the light of destruction shot out frantically, the void sky kept trembling. Nobody knew how many times they collided with each other, but neither of them retreated. The life spirit that shrouded Yi Futian merged into the real demon bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions. It was not a treasure, but it was stronger than other ordinary Renhuang-level treasures. When it merged into the life spirit, Yi Futian's life spirit also contained the might of the demon emperor. It became unshakable. However, Zhan Yuan was also extremely powerful, and his body was also integrated with the Renhuang's object, which made him become one with the great law of thunder, and now he seemed to have become the law itself. In the end, they were separated from each other. The violent blasts were still going on madly around them. The invisible storm swept through the vast and boundless space. Thunder kept rumbling, and there were still endless demon elephants. Zhan Yuan was emotionless. The overbearing might bloomed from his pupils. How could he gain so much strength with the aid of the demon emperor's bone? His attacks couldn't destroy Yi Futian. Above the sky, thunder clouds rolled. Lightning from the 8 directions of the space surged. He turned into the thunder god, controlling tens of thousands of divine thunderbolts to thrust toward Yi Futian all at once. The astonishing sound of elephants trumpeting erupted from Yi Futian's body. The divine light of the great law started to flow. Endless demon elephants around him helped resist the bombardment of rolling divine thunder. Virum. At this moment, Zhan Yuan disappeared, and the sound of thunder echoed in the space. His body was connected to the sky dome, gathering millions of divine thunderbolts and turning them into a flash of lightning, thrusting toward the divine elephant figure Yi Futian transformed into. Boom, boom, boom. Zhan Yuan suddenly came in front of Yi Futian, and the endless attacks fell on Yi Futian's body. Even with the protection of the divine elephant life spirit, Yi Futian still groaned, and his life spirit was on the edge of bursting. The attacking force was appalling. His body was shaken back, and his life spirit seemed to collapse. His hands stretched backward, and a dazzling long stick appeared in his palm. Boom! The elephant stood on the sky dome, stopped moving backward, and slashed the stick with the enormous power of the divine elephant. The sky dome was about to collapse, and the phantom of the thunder god transformed from Zhan Yuan's raised arm and sent out countless stick shadows. The void sky shook violently. After a loud boom, Zhan Yuan's body was blasted down into the lower air. Yi Futian's body was also shaken, his life force fluctuating, organs trembling. Just then, Yi Futian suddenly perceived a strong sense of danger. He immediately turned around and saw a golden lightning bolt striking toward him, at the fastest speed. He lifted one foot and stepped out. The divine elephant made a fierce roar again, trembling the sky and earth, but the golden lightning bolt didn't stop at all, rushed directly in front of him, and hit the light curtain formed by the divine elephant. The lightning bolt penetrated the light curtain, creating a cut on the divine elephant's body. Inside, Yi Futian was like hit by electric shocks. He let out a groan, and the golden lightning bolt rushed straight towards his own body. The elephant's life spirit suddenly collapsed and vanished, but Yi Futian's body was still blooming with a golden aura, with the divine elephant's hidden armor inside. At the same time, the stars surrounded him. He swiftly moved in the void air and wanted to retreat. But it was still too late. The speed was too fast, and he was hit the moment the idea occurred to him. The defense of stars shattered, and the golden aura was cracked. Yi Futian spat out blood, and his body flew straight back. That figure in the lightning moved like a shadow, and it continued to rush toward Yi Futian. His speed was reaching the max limit. Virum! Countless sharp swords thrust out of Yi Futian's body, and a sword of Kasaipa also dashed out of the center of his eyebrows, racing toward Zhan Yuan. The figure in golden light took out one hand to deflect the sword, and only then did he stop. This man was wearing a gorgeous golden robe but looked extremely ugly, with a pair of eyes like a mouse. Yi Futian recognized him at a glance. There weren't many people with this kind of appearance in the heavenly mandate realm. He belonged to the Purple Gold Rat clan in the demon realm, of course. They proclaimed themselves to be the Purple Gold Divine Rats. Before, Zhu Zhao had reminded him not to provoke the demon beasts of this clan. They were vindictive and extremely egocentric creatures. Even though a top figure had appeared from the Rat clan, and this clan was prospering, the self-abasement running in their veins still could not be removed. Moreover, people of the Rat clan were extremely greedy and liked treasures. This purple gold rat that suddenly showed up was aiming at the treasure in Yi Futian's hand, and he chose the right time. "Leave everything to me, I will not kill you," the purple gold rat stared at Yi Futian and said. His narrow and long eyes looked sly but extremely indifferent, showing some sort of pride. Read more chapter on Novelful. Yi Futian glanced at him coldly. Did this warrior of the Rat clan also want to step in? The life force around his body was flowing. He seemed to have perceived something, raised his head, and looked into the distance. There, he saw a few more imposing figures coming, all staring at him with anger. Seeing this, Yaya looked sullen. Did she fail to leave them behind? She had tried her best to bring Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan here. Many warriors dared not set foot on this place, but those top figures still managed to enter this territory and would not give up the things Yi Futian had gotten. Especially now when they had seen the battle between Yi Futian and the Supreme Master Zhan Yuan, they would even more strongly believe that the power of the bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions that Yi Futian had obtained was amazing, and it would be a huge gain for the demon cultivators. I've heard that the purple gold rats are now very strong, but you still can't change their old nature to do such sneaky things. Zhan Yuan glanced over the purple gold rat and said, "If you want it, you should openly take it." The purple gold rat looked at him. Rats never cared about whatever methods they used as long as they could get whatever they wanted. Nobody should forget how hard he and his ancestors worked for their clan to prosper as they do today. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1402 Siege. Chapter 1402 Siege. The ominous atmosphere in this space became more and more intense. The previous battles had broken many rusty swords on the ground, and there were even evil ghosts rising from the underground that seemed to be transformed from the dead people's lingering grudges. At this moment, a pair of ghostly hands stretched out from a crack in the ground. A phantom showed up and pounced towards the person standing in the void sky. As more and more ghosts joined the fight, the warriors, who had just arrived, all perceived the threat. They glanced at Yi Futian indifferently. They must deal with him as soon as possible and leave. For an instant, the warriors released their life forces, which followed Yi Futian and attacked the lower sky. Yi Futian looked up at these warriors. In his life palace, the flame was burning, and the fire spirit orb seemed to be devouring his life palace. And then the blaze rushed to his whole body, engulfing him all at once. For a moment, he transformed into flame god of war, with all the power of his body burning. At the same time, in the endless flame, there was also a golden aura of the divine elephant. The elephant's roars came from his body. A mighty force overwhelmed the vast space. He held a huge stick of stars in his hand, with an unparalleled bearing. Yaya stared at Yi Futian. She rose to her feet, standing on the ground. The infinite sword will erupted from her body, drawing the great law from heaven and summoned tens of thousands of swords. A sword matrix was formed around her body. She could tell that Yi Futian had been injured, and now he had to face such oppression. So many warriors were targeting him. If he let the fire of the law burn again, he would run out of his energy. Let alone what level of combatability he could use. It would be difficult for him to persist for long. Moreover, these warriors were all capable of using nirvana skills. It was looking like none of the top forces from the heavenly mandate realm would be weak. The purple golden rat lifted a brow when he perceived Yi Futian's life force, and his narrow eyes looked cold. He stretched out a palm and immediately a sword that could release Renhuang might appeared in his hand. This was odd, a rat demon beast cultivated in swordsmanship. However, it was rumored that when the old ancestor of the purple golden rat clan was in humble circumstances, He once served many powerful figures and dedicated himself as a beast servant, serving many top figures, and, at the same time, secretly learned many human cultivation methods. So, warriors of the demon realm showed no surprise when seeing this purple-golden rat beast use sword skills. Renhuang level might was being released from the sword. It was a Renhuang object. The sword body was thin and narrow and had strong penetrating abilities. Virum. The purple-golden rat was standing on top of the void sky. He wielded his sword, and for a moment, there seemed to be a rain of golden swords appearing in the void sky, each sword raindrop containing the might of the great law. Over the sky dome, a curtain of sword rain enveloped the boundless space. The rat's sword pointed to Yi Futian, and immediately, the sword rain followed and attacked Yi Futian. The rain curtain covered the sky, and the phantoms of demon elephants around Yi Futian suddenly were all penetrated, like being pierced through by thousands of swords and smashed directly. When the sword rain approached Yi Futian, it even penetrated the might of flames and made a slight dangerous rustling sound. The elephant roar continued in Yi Futian's body. A giant figure of a golden elephant appeared around him. The sword rain fell with no end and kept making a harsh, shrieking sound. The sword raindrops sneaked into the golden divine elephant's body little by little. Boom! Yi Futian took a step out and shook away those shrieking golden swords from the divine elephant figure. He moved quickly and slashed out the long stick in his hand. A huge stick shadow appeared in the upper sky and slashed toward the purple-golden rat's head regardless of the spatial distance. The purple-golden rat shunned and turned into a dazzling bolt of golden lightning, running between the suppressing forces of the great law. His speed was still extremely fast, and he directly avoided the attacks of the long stick and soon appeared in another direction. I should finish the battle quickly, he thought to himself. More evil spirits from the ground rushed up to catch him. Wisps of thoughts entered his mind and made his willpower unstable. He glanced toward them and said, "If you continue consuming time like this, it will be no good for anyone." It was not enough for him alone to take the treasure. Zhan Huan did not expect Yi Futian to have a whole card. Where did this fire that enhanced his strength and endowed him with nirvana-level abilities come from? Yi Futian seemed to carry many secrets. Zhan Yuan strode in the void air. The lightning swept out and destroyed the chaotic life force around him that wanted to erode his body. The nirvana-level warriors who just came to the void space all started to take action. Each of them had an extremely terrifying life force. They all exerted pressure towards Yi Futian in the lower sky. For a time, Yi Futian was besieged by enemies. Boom! The void air shook fiercely. Yi Futian stepped in the void sky, with his body shrouded by flames and his hands wielding the long sticks. Phantoms of demon elephants galloped between the sky and earth. The vast endless space seemed to be under heavy pressure. The purple-golden rat demon beast started to move. He held the imperial sword high in his hand, bearing endless wills in the sky. The golden divine rain fell. His body flickered, heading straight toward the lower sky. The sword came out, and sword rain fell, annihilating everything. Yi Futian felt the power and slashed out the long stick in his hand towards the sky and buried the sword rain. But the purple-golden rat monster was extremely fast and changed his position in an instant. He launched the sword rain and wanted to control Yi Futian in that space. Zhang Yuan stepped in the void air. The thunder roars around him shook the sky and earth. Endless thunder from the sky gathered in his body and turned into thunderous light that destroyed everything, slashing out towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian's stick shadow smashed out again, crushing on the lightning, and a booming sound burst out. Above his head, a Nirvana saint launched an attack. A huge, dark palm print came from the sky dome, reflecting black gold light, containing the strong airflow of destruction and tearing the void air. Yi Futian could only slash out the stick again. His body swirling, and the stick shadows appeared. The dark palm prints collapsed and shattered. Another golden bell released tens of thousands of rays of light, crushing the void air and crumbling the place where Yi Futian was, hiding the might of Renhuang and wiping out all existence. Yi Futian's body soared into the sky. The shadow of the stick covered the sky, and it suddenly chopped down. After a loud clanging noise, the ancient Renhuang clock was shaken back, but the horrifying killing rays of light's attack didn't stop. The Renhuang bell also returned and ran over his body again. The powerful attacks continued. Yi Futian kept waving his stick, but these warriors did not even get close to him. They trapped him there and attacked wildly, consuming Yi Futian's energy, making it impossible for him to escape. After all, every person who was attacking him was powerful. Seeing the battle scene in the void sky, Yaya looked disgusted. All these were top figures, Nirvana saints, and a supreme master, but they all assaulted Yi Futian at the same time, just so they could steal his belongings. As the fight went on, more warriors arrived in the area one after another. Some people were afraid to come because of the danger, but there were still a few bold people who entered the battle. An intimidating life force came, and a Nirvana-level big demon beast Zhu Yen came to this area with Zhu Zhao, Yu Xing, and others. Seeing the battle in the void sky, Yu Xing looked extremely worried. Boom! The sky dome trembled, and divine elephants trumpeted. In the distance, a group of powerful divine elephants raced towards this side. They glanced down at the battlefield in the lower sky and saw the life force erupting from Yi Futian's body, which made them feel something familiar as if it was from their ancestors. "We should help him," Zhu Zhao said. He saw Yi Futian being hit by one attack right after the other, defending himself alone, when the attacks were coming from so many intimidating warriors. The Nirvana-level Zhu Yen great demons might swept out and rushed towards the sky dome. Bang! A violent sound came out. The sound of elephants trumpeting shook the sky. Above Zhu Yen, the great demon beast's head, giant elephants marched in the air, among whom one of the divine elephants glanced at him and said, "Go away." Yi Futian, the divine elephant clan wanted him. The roar continued, and they kept treading in the void air. Warriors on the other side of the battlefield saw warriors of the divine elephant clan, and their attacks became even stronger. In the shadows of the stick, the purple-golden rat demon beast crossed the sky and passed through the stick shadows. Horrifying might blasted over his moving body, but his body turned into the size of a rat and directly penetrated the great law attacking force. This was his innate talent. Bang! With a loud noise, the purple-golden rat demon beast almost penetrated Yi Futian's body and smashed Yi Futian's overall defense. But Yi Futian's body seemed to have a terrifying flame might that made him scared and devoured him. The golden aura wrapped around his body. The rat's sharp claws clawed toward Yi Futian. Using the reaction force, he stepped back. His heart thumped fast. What was that power? Boom! The might of the thunder laws also blasted over Yi Futian, making his body fall to the ground. The purple-golden rat was extremely fast. He continued to dive down and wanted to take Yi Futian away. A gust of sword might arrived in an instant and thrust straight toward him. The purple-golden rat spun his body. The Renhuang sword in his hand thrust down and turned into a horrifying golden storm that collided with the sword. The sharp shrieking sound came, and golden blood flew from the purple-golden rat. He was shaken to the void sky. Yaya fell to the lower sky with Yi Futian and dropped on the sword peak. Both of them spat out blood. Yu Sheng and others rushed to check them, but considering their levels, they couldn't change the situation at all. In the void air, those top saint figures looked down at them. "Get out of our way!" Warriors of the divine elephant clan marched in the void sky. Many divine elephants descended at the same time, and suddenly their might shook the sky. Even the supreme master Zhan Yuan of the violet heavenly palace didn't dare to trouble them. That purple-golden rat demon beast looked sullen. The divine elephant clan was also very powerful. In the era of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions, the divine elephant clan was the king of the realm, and they still had a vast heritage after so many years. Now, since they had arrived, it was difficult for him to take the treasure. Warriors of different forces stared at each other with anger, and both Yi Futian and Yaya were severely injured. Yi Wuchen looked indifferent, with anger and sadness in his heart. So many warriors of the heavenly mandate realm chose to besiege one single person. However, they simply could not participate in combat of such a high level. He raised one foot and walked toward their direction. This space was suppressed by countless broken swords and filled with horrifying chaotic thoughts. Boom! There was another loud bang. Warriors stepped down and exerted pressure on Yi Futian. Except for the warriors of the Divine Elephant clan, none of them wanted to give up. He belongs to me, Zhang Yuan said indifferently. He might not want the Divine Elephant Imperial bone since it was the bone of the ancestor of the Divine Elephant clan, and he didn't want the corpse, either. However, he was interested in Yi Futian. Yi Futian had more treasures. The corpse belongs to me, another Nirvana-level warrior said. They had already started to discuss how to divide gains. But at this moment, a rumbling sound came out, and the mountain peak was shaking. They turned around and looked toward that side. On the top of the mountain, in front of the giant sword inserted in front of the sword peak, a man in white with long hair blowing in the wind was standing, holding the hilt of a sword with both hands. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1403 The Threat of Renhuang. Chapter 1403 The Threat of Renhuang. The warriors' faces all turned pale. They could perceive the chaos going on in the space. The endless broken swords seemed to be used to seal a land of demons, and this sword peak might be the place where the main sword was located. The giant sword inserted above the sword peak probably was the key to seal this space. Once it was pulled out, the consequence might be disastrous. However, at this moment, someone was trying to pull the sword out. "Stop it," people yelled. In front of the giant sword, the figure pulled it with both hands, and the ground made a roaring sound. The vast boundless space was trembling. Those broken swords inserted into this land made high-pitched shrieks, and a devastating storm swept through the vast void air. Under the ground, horrible life forces were released, like countless dead warriors remaining thoughts that had been suppressed by this land. At this moment, they were all being released. Too presumptuous. A Nirvana Plane warrior raised his hand and launched attacks towards the figure that was pulling the sword, but a terrifying vortex appeared over the sword and quickly engulfed the person pulling the sword. There seemed to be a phantom-like figure amid the chaotic airflow that rushed into his mind, rolling towards his body. The attack of the Nirvana Plane warrior came near him but was blocked by the terrifying storm. "It's dangerous, step back," the sword saint yelled. But Yi Wuchen still stood in the center of the storm. The blue veins on his body were visible. There was horrifying bloody light in his eyes. The extremely chaotic thoughts invaded his mind directly as if they were trying to overtake his mind. The sword saint's face looked very pale. He could understand the situation Yi Wuchen was facing at the moment. The sword that the mysterious warrior gave him at that time, the demonic sword he was using today, contained similar energy just like this one, and also full of demonic thoughts as if actual demons were dwelling inside. However, those demonic thoughts had been sealed, so his demonic sword was now a safe weapon. But even so, the sword saint was very clear how Yi Wuchen suffered every time he used the demonic sword. The agony was unbearable for normal people even though the sword had been sealed. What would happen if the seal was released? The huge sword that Yi Wuchen wanted to pull out was like his demonic blade. It was sealed and used to quell the land. But at this moment, Yi Wuchen wanted to pull it out. He would die. How devastating the consequence would be if the lingering beings in the land were freed from the quelling power. What kind of price was waiting for Yi Wuchen at the center of the storm to pay? The sword saint could imagine, had the situation already become this serious? Yi Wuchen's eyes glowed with terrifying bloody light as if they were no longer his own eyes. However, deep in his pupils, there was still a sense of sobriety. It was his willpower fighting against the erosion of terrifying power. His body didn't seem to belong to him anymore, but his hands still held the giant sword tight. Boom! The earth was still shaking, and countless horrifying phantoms flew from the ground, stunning those who wanted to assault Yi Futian for a while. They looked quite unsettled. Was this lunatic trying to kill everyone? Yi Wuchen didn't stop. Under countless gazes, he pulled out the giant sword with both hands little by little. He didn't have time to think. So many top figures joined forces to suppress Yi Futian and even discussed how to divide gains. In a situation like this, what else could he do to counter them? There might be many demons buried in the ground, but what was the difference between these bloodthirsty top cultivators and the demons? Considering Yi Futian's ability, he was even more likely to survive in front of the demons in the ground. However, those greedy top figures would not let him go. So, after seeing the whole situation, Yi Wuchen came to the sword peak alone and pulled out the sword. A beam of dark light vertically pierced into the sky. The sword was finally pulled out. The sword peak collapsed, and a terrifying air torrent rushed into the sky. But Yi Wuchen's body was submerged by the infinite darkness. The ground shook, countless broken swords flew up, and the land cracked. Many deep crevices appeared. From the cracks, many hands came out and grasped onto the ground. Many phantoms rose and rushed directly toward the cultivators fighting in the void sky. The situation was chaos. Many warriors looked terrified and scattered instantly, trying to escape. Boom! On the sword peak where Yi Wuchen was located, the land was divided into two, splitting up from the middle. The two pieces of land seemed to be completely divided, and the gap was getting bigger and bigger. Between the divided pieces of land, horrifying life forces were spreading. Everyone was horrified. Countless air currents continued to flow into the giant sword. The opened ground turned into an endless abyss. Looking down from above, no one could see the bottom of it. There were only horrifying life forces being released out of the abyss. At the time, in the bottomless abyss, in the endless darkness, two flashes of bloody light suddenly appeared. These two flashes of red light looked extremely scary, like the eyes of a demon. The terrifying demonic light aroused tumult in the whole abyss. But just after a moment, these two flashes of light dispersed as if nothing had happened. Yi Wuchen held the sword tight. His body was shaking, and his eyes turned into the color of blood. His handsome face became distorted, and the energy of his whole body seemed to be devoured, but the life force surrounding his body was extremely terrifying. He didn't seem to be himself at all. He turned around and looked toward other people. The Supreme Master Zhan Yuan was using the Divine Thunder to resist the erosion of demons. Warriors of the Divine Elephant Clan were trampling over the sky to suppress evils. Other warriors also used their means to defend. However, even in this chaotic situation, the purple golden rat demon beast had not given up yet. He turned into a bolt of lightning and thrust towards Yi Futian as if, at this moment, he still wanted to take Yi Futian away. He would never give up without reaching his goal. However, at this moment, he suddenly became alert and perceived a dangerous life force. He immediately turned around and saw a pair of demonic eyes shrouding him. The horrifying demonic will directly came into his eyes and invaded his mind. He trembled, showing panic, and hurried back. The giant sword swept by, chopping over the space he was in. A terrifying trembling sound came out, and the purple golden rat beast spat out blood like crazy. He seemed to be covered with a layer of purple gold armor that blocked most damage for him. Otherwise, this blow would have been far more serious. The purple gold rat demon beast was moved far away and spat out a mouthful of blood, and wisps of airflow rushed towards him. The purple gold rat demon beast turned into golden lightning and fled through a gap, wanting to escape this area. Had that lunatic been eroded by demons after drawing the sword and had become a demon himself? His blood-red eyes were extremely scary, and Yi Wuchen flashed away. The sword in his hand devoured endless airflows between the sky and earth, and then chopped down towards those warriors in the void air. Suddenly, a terrifying dark vortex gushed out, like numerous phantoms together with the sword dashing toward those warriors and rushed directly toward their bodies. At the same time, Yi Wuchen's body turned into a dark lightning bolt and struck directly toward Zhan Yuan of the Violet Heavenly Palace. Zhan Yuan saw Yi Wuchen coming. Yi Wuchen's body was wrapped by the horrifying air currents. At this moment, he was not himself. Boom! The rolls of thunder kept roaring, and the lightning illuminated the whole sky. Thousands of flashes of thunder and lightning blasted toward Yi Wuchen. Under divine thunder, those countless phantoms were directly wiped out. The violent lightning struck directly over Yi Wuchen's body. The sword left Yi Futian's hand and turned into dark lightning. It broke through the forces of heavy thunder and crushed on Zhang Yuan's body. The hissing sound came. It seemed that Zhang Yuan's body was almost penetrated. Blood flew out of his body, and the devastating air currents rushed into him frantically. His whole body was filled with the breaths of death and was growing black. The lighting was gradually fading, and his face looked dead. At this moment, a beam of strong light bloomed. Zhang Yuan let out a roar. Over his body, the mighty imperial power swept out, and a phantom of the supreme Renhuang Lord appeared. The sacred light shrouded Zhang Yuan's body, expelling the dark air flows around him and directly wiping out all the chaotic wills. The Emperor's aura shone. The divine thunder came and destroyed everything, and many chaotic wills around him were all shattered. His eyes were extremely sharp, like the eyes of a deity, sweeping towards Yi Wuchen. "Just evil crafts," he said in disdain. His eyes looked indifferent. He pointed his finger forward. Yi Wuchen took back the sword and slashed out a strike. The sacred lightning illuminated the vast sky dome and collided with the terrifying dark sword light. An unparalleled life force of destruction erupted, and an astonishing storm blew across the world. Boom! Finally, Yi Wuchen was the first one who couldn't bear it anymore. After all, he was using the external strength to fight. Instead of his ability, how could he fight against the real Renhuang will? The flash of lightning pierced through his body. If he had not had the endless airflow as protection, the blow would have been enough to turn him to ashes. "We should go first," Renhuang glanced at the place and said, frowning. It seemed that the danger had been triggered, and he had to get Zhang Yuan to leave with him. "Let's take him with us as well." Zhang Yuan pointed his finger at Yi Futian and said. Even at this moment, he still didn't forget capturing Yi Futian. Especially after his confrontation with Yi Futian, Zhang Yuan became more interested in him. This young man was even able to compete with all the top warriors at the same time by using the power of the bone of the divine elephant emperor of 10 directions. And how did he launch the flames of the way? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 14:0 For the Hearts Following the Lie. Chapter 14:0 For the Hearts Following the Lie. The Renhuang figure of the Violet Heavenly Palace looked toward Yi Futian, slightly nodding, and then stepped forward. Covered with the bright thunderlight armor, he slightly raised his arms and headed toward Yi Futian. Yaya and others looked sullen. Was this Renhuang warrior also going to capture Yi Futian? Yi Wuchen on the ground rose to his feet again. He held the sword with both hands, and the bloody light burst out from his deep, dark eyes. At this moment he seemed to have given up his self-consciousness, and the sword will darted toward his body madly and swallowed him up. He seemed to have become part of the sword, not only that, all the horrible air flows around him in the space poured into his body. With a roar, Yi Wuchen's body was devoured. Over him, a real demon appeared. The demon stared at the Renhuang warrior, and the sword in his hand was also roaring and shaking. "You are giving yourself to evils." The Renhuang of the Violet Heaven Palace shouted at him solemnly. Even his voice contained horrifying might of thunder and wanted to penetrate the demon's body, but it was of no use. Yi Wuchen was still standing there. The Renhuang of the Violet Heavenly Palace had no choice but to put down Zhang Yuan. He needed to deal with the monster in front of him first. "You give me a moment," he spoke to Zhang Yuan. Soon the might of thunder fell from the sky, and his body turned into the law of thunder, just like a real figure of thunder deity. He took one step forward, crossing the void sky and heading toward Yi Wuchen. Virum. At the same time, the sword saint held the overbearing demonic sword. The terrifying demonic might surged straight to Zhang Yuan's body. Yu Sheng, Zhu Zhao, and Black Wind Condor did the same. Since they couldn't fight with the Renhuang, they would target Zhang Yuan. Everything started with him. Accompanied with a rumble, the demon Yi Wuchen launched an attack on the Renhuang. The sword penetrated his body directly, but the Renhuang's body was nothing but a thunder thought. The thunder thought also penetrated the demon's body. Suddenly, the huge demon burst frantically. The light of endless thunder entangled it, and with a loud noise, phantoms around it all burst and shattered. Yi Wuqian's figure showed up from the explosion but again fell feebly. However, the Renhuang was not well at this time either. His body was exposed to countless dark airstreams that devoured his thunder form, making the lightning gradually dim and trying to devour his thunder thought completely. He glanced toward Yi Futian with a cold look. "Take them away," Yaya sitting on the ground said to a beautiful figure next to her. That person looked at Yaya with a pair of gorgeous but emotionless eyes. She was the first beauty of the eastern state of that time, the glass saint. "Go to that abyss." Yaya stared at the glass saint's eyes and said, showing no expression. The glass saint also looked back at her eyes. If she went to the abyss, would she survive? Was she telling her to go die? At this moment, her heart was stirred, no longer as calm as before. "Aren't you always looking for the answer? If you find it, you die," Yaya said in an extremely indifferent tone, without any emotion, as if this unsmiling girl, who was always patted on the head by Yi Futian, had turned into a real cold-blooded and ruthless sword saint of the void. But was she ruthless? She asked the glass saint to die. The glass saint lowered her head slightly, looking at Yi Futian, but at this time, Yi Futian was also looking up at her. The glass saint wondered what answer was she looking for. "Okay," she answered. When the horrifying might befell, and the Renhuang of the Violet Heaven Palace came near, she grabbed Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan with both hands. Seeing Yi Futian wanting to move, she released the might of ice and sealed Yi Futian's body using extreme coldness, and she took the two of them directly toward the direction of abyss. The Renhuang frowned and continued to pounce toward them, but at this moment, a bright sword matrix shone across space, and thousands of rays of sword light slashed out. Yaya, severely injured, submerged the Renhuang figure with the sword light. "You are playing with fire," the Renhuang said coldly and continued moving forward. The thunder light directly destroyed the might of sword. Virum. The sword matrix engulfed toward him, and a sword burst out from the center of the matrix. The Renhuang of the Violet Heavenly Palace raised his hand to draw the divine thunder. The imperial might swept across the world and destroyed tens of thousands of swords, but that single sword continued to drop down and penetrate his body. At the same time, those dark forces that devoured his body became stronger, little by little making his body disperse. He turned around and took a glance. At this time, Zhang Yuan was also under siege. All his opponents seemed to be attacking him at all costs. Zhang Yuan had been wounded by Yi Wuqian before, otherwise, he would have not been threatened by these low-level people. Boom! Zhang Yuan's fist collided with Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng clasped his fist directly. The violent might of thunder pierced through his body and banged on Yu Sheng, but Yu Sheng's hands still clasped on him tightly. The sword saint's sword chopped off. Zhang Yuan let out a roar and accumulated divine thunder in his palm. The black wind condor swooped down toward Zhang Yuan. He had almost turned into a demonic instrument, a pair of eyes full of killing thoughts. Zhang Yuan raised his head, the terrifying thunderous light erupting in his eyes, shooting toward the black wind condor. The demonic sword split the sky, blood splashed and a deep blood mark appeared on Zhang Yuan's body, but his arm also shook Yu Sheng away. Boom! There was another loud bang. A long stick slashed down. The might of thunder violently blasted from Zhang Yuan's body, but he was still pushed away by the force. When he stopped, Zhang Yuan looked down at his arms and body. A startling bloodstain was there as if being eroded by demonic wills. A lot of dark airflows rushed toward him, and his face looked extremely gloomy. "You retreat first," a voice from the Renhuang of the Violet Heavenly Palace said. He shook his arm, and the sword matrix was annihilated. Yaya's body was shaken out, blood splattering in the void sky, and she weakly fell on the ground. The Renhuang turned into a flash and ran toward the glass saint and Yi Futian. The glass saint now was standing on the edge of the abyss. In the bottomless abyss, there were endless dark air torrents, as if ancient monsters were looming inside, filled with infinite danger. If the power in this abyss broke out, even the Renhuang would not dare stay here. She took a glance at Yi Futian and then stepped forward and leaped down toward the endless abyss. She hoped Yi Futian could survive. Yi Futian seemed to have strong adaptability in these dangerous places, and she hoped it would be the same this time. The Renhuang descended on the edge of the abyss, and countless air flows came. He looked indifferent, turned around and transformed into a flash of lightning. His form was about to dissipate, and he had to take Zhan Yuan away. At this time, Zhan Yu's whole body was stained with blood, and killing thoughts were reflected in his pupils. "Let's go," his voice rang out. The Renhuang's phantom showed up and used his remaining strength to guard Zhan Yuan's body and soared into the sky, letting the terrible dark power eat away at his body and still rush out of this district with Zhan Yuan under his protection. Other warriors also made their way to escape. The destructive power of this space was getting stronger and stronger, and soon, only those around Yi Futian were still there. "It's going to go." A Nirvana-level Zhu Yan demon beast came to Zhu Zhao and said. At this moment, it was not easy to escape. He let out a yell and turned into Zhu Yan's original form. The huge beast stood on the ground like a mountain. Zhu Zhao looked in the direction of the abyss, but the Nirvana-level Zhu Yan great demon beast seized him directly, asking the Sword Saint and others, "Do you want to go with us?" "You can go," the Sword Saint said. The Zhu Yan great demon beast let out a roar, took his people and soared into the sky, escaping the space. The Sword Saint raised his foot and walked toward the abyss. The Sword Saint's whole body was covered by the demon might. Yaya and Yi Wuchen were severely injured. Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan had been to the abyss. How did they go? Where should they go? The Sword Saint approached Yaya, raised his head and asked Black-Winged Condor, "Condor, is Yi Futian all right?" The Black-Winged Eagle stood in front of the abyss, staring down, and said, "They were still going down." He looked back at Sword Saint and said, "Glass Saint, I am afraid she is in danger." How deep was this abyss? The Sword Saint lowered his head. He inserted the demonic sword on the ground next to Yaya, holding the demonic sword with one hand. Suddenly the mighty demonic will power swept out, dispersing all evil spirits. He was covered by the demonic will and seemed to be enduring very intense pain. Yaya sent the Glass Saint to death. However, Yaya intended to prevent Yi Futian from being taken away. Yi Futian had too many secrets on him and must not be taken away. If he was taken to the Violet Heavenly Palace, he would die. So, Yaya asked the Glass Saint to send Yi Futian to the abyss, which was equal to letting her die. He understood that Yaya was making the right choice. Yi Futian had survived too many life and death situations, especially in the secret relics. His survivability was amazing. If he went to the abyss, there was still a chance for him, but if he was taken away, he would be killed. And that was also why Yaya sacrificed her life to block the Renhuang. Yuxing walked to Yi Wuchen's side. At this time, Yi Wuchen was eroded by the darkness. He was not only seriously injured but not even like himself. Yaya and Yi Wuchen were the injured the worst, and they had more than just injuries. Yaya used what was left of her power to stop the opponent from taking Yi Futian away, and the other one, as a doctrine saint, pulled the sword and induced the demonic power entering his body. How did he afford the pain? Yuxing came near Yi Wuchen and sat cross-legged in front of him. His whole body was in golden radiance, and there was Buddha's whispering echoing between the sky and the earth. The golden aura of Buddha shrouded this place and also wrapped around Yi Wuchen's body. Behind Yuxing, the Buddha's light shone, and many Buddhist statues appeared. Tens of thousands of Buddhas together worshipped the law, emitting glaring Buddhist radiance. Countless Buddhist charms showed up and flew toward Yi Wuchen's body. At the same time, Yuxing chanted Sanskrit mantras. The Sanskrit chants resonated with the sky and earth and gradually turned into the supreme power of karma, which was trying to influence Yi Wuchen. There was nothing more that Yuxing could do, and he could only pray that Wuchen could pass through this calamity. On the other side, the Sword Saint was looking at Yuxing. There were two more severely injured people in need of being taken care of. He would take care of Yaya, and Wuchen would be in the care of Yuxing. He raised his head and glanced at this dim world. It seemed that now it had truly become a demon's cave. However, even though they were surrounded by the boundless darkness, their hearts still followed the light. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., Please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.